everybody, I'm back today with a quick share and then a tutorial. I wanted to share how to use paper napkins in your projects. So I made some journals with these paper napkins. It was inspired by this beautiful napkin that Jess sent me. And I just thought it was so pretty and I couldn't wait to use it. It was a large napkin, so I actually made a trifold journal out of it. And I added a little butterfly charm that she also sent me in the package. So it opens up with an elastic closure. It has 3 different fold outs, and I used all of the napkin because it was so pretty. So what didn't fit on the covers, I used on the tags inside. So it's just very basic. I thought the napkin was so pretty, I didn't want to take away from it, so I didn't do much besides distress. These are from a different collection, but I have a little journaling booklet inside. Just a couple of pages, and then in the back here, I have a tag that I made for something else that I thought matched really well, and then the rest of the napkin. And on the back, I have the little piece here tucked underneath the pocket, and then I have a little notebook in here. So it's just a really quick, fun little journal booklet that I'm not sure what I'm going to use it for yet, but it was just fun to design and really showcase the napkin. And the one that I'm going to do the tutorial for is this one here. So it's using a napkin to make this piece too, but the napkin wasn't as large as the napkin that Jess sent me, and so I made this one just a regular journal. It doesn't have the trifold because there weren't as many pieces, but I actually used 2 napkins to make this. So stay tuned and I will show you how to make this journal here. To start the project, you just need to take a plain paper napkin, whatever design you want. I bought this pack of 20 from Tuesday Morning for $2.29, and it can be any size you want depending on your project. I have a smaller one for this, but the one that Jess sent me that I showed you earlier was a bigger napkin, so I was able to make a bit of a bigger project. So the first thing we're going to do is flip the napkin over on the back side, and we're going to need a piece of just regular Scotch tape, and we're going to peel the layers apart. So the easiest way to do this is to stick the piece of tape on the corner, and then as you start to lift the tape up, it should start to peel the layer, the backing off of the napkin. So we have the first layer off, and we're not going to use that, so we can toss that aside. And then this napkin actually has another layer that we're going to remove. Not all napkins do, so depending if you have a 2 or 3 layer napkin, you want to take as many layers off as you can. So we're going to repeat the process, and it's a little harder with this second layer. And once we get it started, I'm just going to very carefully tear the napkin layers apart. Once you have all the layers peeled apart, you'll notice it's much, much thinner. It's like a sheet of tissue paper. So we can get rid of this layer. And we're ready to get started. So for my project, I have a napkin that is 10 inches square. So I am going to use a piece of black cardstock. It is 8.5 by 11, and I have decided that I'm going to put the napkin on the paper, and I am going to leave a little bit at the top, and I'm gonna fold it over, and then this piece I'm gonna leave too because I'm going to make this into a flap in the inside. So I am going to decide where I want to glue this down, and there's a logo for the napkin down here, so I have it facing in the right direction, and I'm going to glue this as neatly as I can to the paper, just like this. So for this step, I have on my desktop, I have a piece of freezer paper with the shiny waxy side up so that I can just put my glue directly on it and it will not stick to it. So I am using Mod Podge to do this step, but you can use any type of glue or medium that you prefer to use. I like to just use a paintbrush, an old paintbrush that I have, and just to get started, I will hold the napkin kind of in place where I want it, and I'm just gonna brush the glue right over top of the napkin on the sides first, just to get it glued down to the paper so that whenever I start putting glue over the rest of it, it doesn't shift. Once all of the edges are glued down and the entire napkin is covered with glue, you want to let it dry before you do anything else. But if you have some overhang that you're going to use, you can turn this over and glue it to the back side, like I'm gonna do. But you wanna be careful when you do this that it doesn't mess up the front side. So just be really careful. I'm just gonna put a little bit of glue to get it started, but I'm not going to glue the whole thing down. I'll come back to this later. And you want to set the piece aside so it can dry fully before you do anything else to it, because the napkin is really wet. Like you could see, I kind of tore it a little bit with my finger there. So you've got to be really careful when there's this much glue on it. So I'm going to set this aside to dry, and then we'll move on to the next step. While we are waiting for the napkin and the glue to dry, we're going to move on to the next step. For this step, I'm going to put tags inside of my album, so I'm using the large graphic 45 metal tag die, And I have cut out 2 black cardstock of the tag, and then I've cut out 2 of my pattern paper that I'm going to use. I'm going to put some plain cardstock on the back for some journaling, and I'm just going to leave it like a plain white or cream. So what I'm going to do is just glue these together first. And now that I have both of the front sides glued on, I'm going to use some Tim Holtz Distress ink around the edges. Because my paper, my cardstock is black, I am going to use one of the the blacker colors. So I have Hickory Smoke and I have Black Soot. So I'm going to use Hickory Smoke. It's a little bit lighter than the Black Soot, so it'll be a little bit more subtle. I'm also going to use this on the napkin as well to give it some additional texture. So I don't want it to be too dark, but I do want to be able to see it lightly. Now that I am finished with my 2 tags, I am going to decorate them. And what I'm going to do is make them match my background. So I have another napkin, it's the same exact thing, and I am going to take the layers apart just like I did with the first napkin. So I have my 2 layers now, and if you look at the one that I did earlier, because I used black cardstock, you can see that because the napkin is so thin, a lot of the black is actually showing through where you don't see all of the design. So you can really see the distinct flowers on this one, but you can't quite see on this one. So this is the same exact image. It's much more faded here. And I like this look for the cover because I'm going to distress it. But for the tags, I want it to be much more bold. So I'm not gonna take the second layer off of the tissue paper off the back. So I'm just gonna take the one off and I'm gonna leave the other 2 for the next step. So with this next step, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take one of the tags and I'm going to decide which part of this napkin I want to feature on here. So I think I like this part here. So I can either just tear the napkin to the pieces that I want, and then you'll see some of the design paper, or you can cover the entire tag with it. So what I'm gonna do is I am going to cut my napkin around these butterflies. So with this tag, I'm going to have it look like this whenever it's finished. You're gonna have a little bit of the paper still showing, but you'll have the napkin down here. If you want, you can tear this so that it looks more of a roughened edge, but I'm gonna take my distress ink when I'm done and I'm going to actually go over it so it won't look quite as bold and as obvious where the line is. So again, I'm going to take my Mod Podge and I'm going to adhere this napkin to the front of this tag, just like we did with the other one. the second tag, you do the same thing. And this time I'm going to use this side of the napkin, so I'm just going to cut it. And I'm going to cover the entire tag this time. So I'm actually going to cover the back side of it because I'm going to use the front side to put some journaling on there. And just like with the first piece, you want to set the tags aside. I'm going to slightly trim this one now that it is a little bit drier.
You can also tuck this around the back side if you want to have a little bit of a design on the back.
So I'm going to set both of my tags aside, and I'm going to bring in the piece that we just did a minute ago. It is now dry, so I can feel all the texture of the napkin. There are some slight wrinkles in it, but that's okay. Like I said, I like the wrinkly pieces where it's not a ton, but it is a little bit because it's going to actually pick up my distressing. So what I'm going to do with this is I am going to put a second layer of glue on the entire thing to make sure that it is nice and sealed. And now we want to make sure that we let this dry, and we also want to add a second layer to the tags. So because they're a little bit smaller, they've actually already started to dry. This one is already dry, so I'm going to add a second layer onto it, and hopefully the other one will dry by the time I'm finished. Okay, so all of the pieces now have the second layer of Mod Podge on them, so I am going to let these dry really well. I like to let them dry for at least a couple of hours or let them sit overnight, and then we'll come back to them after they've been dried for a while, and then we'll add some additional touches to them. Once all of your papers are dry, you want to try to just bend them if they're a little bit curved to make them flat. And I've already done this off camera, but just doing a little bit more so that they lay as flat as possible. This one's a little bit curved, so I'm just gonna work the paper just a little bit to try to get it to lay a little bit flatter. And then this one, same thing, but eventually I'm going to curve this one anyway, so it doesn't matter too much right now. I'm going to first trim up the edges on my tags, just cutting around them. For the back of this one, I have cut a piece of plain white cardstock using my large metal die again, and then I just slightly trimmed the edges to give it that black border. So I'm going to glue this on to the back of the tag now. And then I'm going to ink around the edges another time. Starting with my cover piece, I'm going to lightly ink on the actual napkin to give it a little bit of a more distressed look. Then I'm going to do the same thing with both of the tags. to set the tags aside and come back to the cover, and I'm going to work on this piece here. So what I'm going to do is grab my scoring tool, and I'm going to score right along where this fold is. You fold this back so that it's on the inside. And then I'm going to ink this edge. And this is going to be a pocket for one of my tags, so I want to make sure that my tag can slip inside of this pocket here. So because the tag is pretty large, it's actually a little bit bigger than the paper size, I want to make sure that it will still tuck in. So it'll still tuck in, but it won't tuck in all the way, but I'm going to glue these down later. For right now though, I want to fold this in half and just give it a slight crease, but not all the way, so we know where the middle is going to be. And then again, this will fit in here and it'll stick up at the top a little bit, but when this is glued down, it'll be a pocket. I'm going to cover the inside with decorative paper before I glue this down. So I'm going to be using the same paper that I used to make the tags. And I need to measure first. So I want my piece to be 9.5 inches by 8.25. I'm going to glue the two flaps, the sides of this flap down. And now we have a pocket that the tag will fit in. I'm going to take a piece of the design paper. I'm just going to use the back side of this and cut a strip to put here. So I need this one to be 1 inch by 8.25. The next step is to cut the pages for the journal. So I have taken 3 sheets that are 8.5 by 14, but you can use any size papers that you want. These are just some that I have around that I haven't used for anything else. And I'm going to make my pages tri-fold pages, where this is going to be the part of the signature that's sewn in. So I have made one so far, and I'm going to make the other 2 to show you how to do them. So first we're going to take the paper and we're going to line it up at the 4.5 and score it. Fold it. And then we're going to score it again at 4.5. And then we're going to cut off the excess. Then I'm going to turn my paper, and on the 8.5 side, I'm going to cut to 8.25 so my pages don't stick out of my book. And now I have a second tri-fold page. And you can also turn them around if you want the fold out to be on the other side. You can repeat the process with the third piece. We have our journaling booklet. First fold out, second fold out, and the third fold out. These are going to sit right inside of here, and they will be completely inside the book. So I'm going to sew these in next, so I need to get some type of thread to sew it in, or if you want elastic, you can use elastic as well. To begin to sew the signatures in, first I am going to open the booklet of papers up to the middle and paper clip them open. And then I'm going to take my cover, I'm going to place it in the cover, and then paper clip all of these together. Just lining everything up because I'm going to poke holes through all the layers at once. I previously made a whole template for another project, and I just keep it around and use it. So since this one is the same size, I can use it, but you don't have to. You can also take a ruler and you can mark where you're going to poke your holes. My holes are just under 2 inches, so 1 7/8 inches apart. I'm going to use a 5-hole pamphlet stitch. You can use 3 if you want. The other one that I made only had 3 and it works just fine. So with my template, I'm going to take my piercing tool and I'm going to pierce through all of these layers. And now I have my holes where I'm going to stitch. So I'm using needle and thread, and I am going to do a pamphlet stitch with this. You can either have your threads start on the inside or start on the outside. It just depends on whether you want the stitch threads to be on the inside of the booklet or the outside when you're done. So I'm going to start mine on the inside and leave the threads on the inside. Pages in. I've got the tag. And the tag for back. So now I'm going to make a pocket here for the tag for the back to sit in. To make the pocket, I'm just going to use the same paper as from the front. It's my last leftover piece of scrap. And I'm going to just make this pocket 4 3/4 inches. I'm going to cut my piece of paper. I want to use this part, so I'm going to cut it to 5 3/4. And I'm going to score 1/2 inch around 3 of the sides. Pocket that my tag will sit in. So I'm going to glue my pocket on. Now the booklet itself is done. You can decorate the pages any way you want. You can ink your pages up or use coffee dyed or tea stain papers if you prefer that. You can put little embellishments on the pages, like some of these little tags that I have. You can make tuck spots. That's up to you what you want to do with your journaling booklet. You can also add more tags to the back of here with other pieces of paper if you want as well. The final thing we're going to do is put a closure on the front of the journal. So I am going to use a ribbon closure on my journal. To make my closure, I am going to use my crocodile. I'm going to place some grommets in the holes, and I'm going to use this ribbon. So first thing I'm going to do is find my center and mark that. It's kind of hard to see on my napkin. Okay. And I'm going to use my larger hole, set it at 1/2 inch, and I'm going to set this at 1/4 inch. Now that we have all of the ribbon on our booklet and our tags, you can leave it plain like this if you want, but you can also add as much embellishment as you choose. I like the look of the napkin on the outside just plain, so I personally am not going to add anything else to the front cover, but I might come in here and embellish some of the pages with some of my little postcard tags and pieces that I have from a different paper collection. So I'm going to do that off camera, and then I'll be back to share the final product. I'm back with the finished journal. So as I said, I left my cover plain and I have my journal tied closed. So when I open it, on the inside cover we have the tag that pulls out. It's just plain. I didn't do any decorating on that. I have left this open so that you can slide something behind it. This one's slightly open too, so there are 2 layers here. But I left most of my pages blank just so that I had lots of room. I want this to be for journaling or photos. So these pages are plain. This one I used a piece of the napkin to decorate, and then flipping open I used another piece of the napkin here. I have lightly inked the edges of all of my papers just to give it a little bit of contrast. This one is open, so it's a tuck spot. These pages are blank. Again, another piece of the napkin here. Another tuck spot, another piece of the napkin. And then the back with the pocket, and I left the tag plain on the back. So that's it. It's really simple, but it is meant for journaling or just adding some photos, maybe shopping lists, whatever you would choose to use it for. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. I hope you have fun customizing your project. But remember, it's a really fun way to use decorative napkins in a project. So if you have any napkins laying around the house from leftover parties or whatever, take one out and try it. It's a really fun idea. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for watching.